Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Thomas, for the kind introduction. So I'm coming from Finland, and as Trude said, on Wednesday we are living in the demographic winter or fertility winter, which for the Finnish part has meant that we lost 1/3 of our births in just 15 years. This is driven in Finland, as in the other Nordic countries, by a sharp and unexpected decline in first births. And the proportion of childlessness in all age groups is rising really dramatically. Currently, more than 1 in 5 women are childless at the end of their reproductive years, and this means that we have a high reproductive skew in fertility, so 1/4 of the women bear half of the children. I don't see any quick end to this continuing rise in postponement and also accompanied by childlessness. Now, of course, we increasingly understand that this sudden shift during the last 10 to 15 and even the last 2 to 3 years infertility behavior is not at all unique to the Nordic countries. And indeed, most of the world currently seems to experience something of a similar shift and a drop in fertility, which means that we have had to revise our understanding of the projection of human population growth. You may know the latest. So I remember when I came to JASA for the first time, Wolfgang Lutz had this fascinating workshop, and they were saying that, fertility will decline faster than expected due to education, and probably population growth can end in the 2070s. And that sounded like, very radical and very, very kind of shocking thought. And now the UK medium fertility scenario projects the end of population growth in the 2080s. The low fertility scenario projects the end of population growth in the 2050s, and many experts think if current trends continue, we are rather on the low fertility track. So here you see this, the kind of global development. However this goes, we are now, it seems, living in the century of depopulation. And this is of course driven by really many benign trends: wealth, education, increasing life expectancy, which we hope will continue. But this raises the very, to me, fascinating question of where will fertility behavior eventually go? I mean, at some point, somewhere the bottom will be reached. We don't know, but we may not have seen the lowest fertility levels. At which levels will they stabilize? How will humanity look? If we take the long historical perspective, of course, we know that population growth is a very exceptional situation for humanity. For most of humanity, our net reproduction rate was around 1, and often lower. So kind of the number of surviving children women used to have was for a really long time around 2. And then we had the last century, that graph is from the 50s, but that may be over, and kind of what then? So when I will invite you here to discuss childbearing cues, which are the drivers of fertility, and I think in order to start to conceptualize and approach and even raise the questions of what is going on, what is driving this, we need, as Jackie, the first plenary speaker, said, a psychodemographic approach, and I would add that we need an evolutionarily informed approach. So I will here briefly talk through 3 statements or claims, which I believe to be scientifically true. When I start to think of the 3 of them at the same time, there's a lot of uneasy tension going on in my mind, and I will look forward to your responses. So these are the 3 claims I think are true, and how do these fit together? The first has to do with our great capacity to adapt. And I mean, throughout human history, we manage to survive and have enough surviving children to reproduce eventually. The enormous plasticity in human family arrangements, and which also leads to reproductive timing. The second has to do with baby fever. I come back, I have a new graph of baby fever from Finland, how it looks today during the demographic fertility winter. And then I will tie back towards the end, towards what Jackie was already talking about earlier. How come our society seems to be at odds with female reproductive biology, and is there anything we can or should do about it? But first, to really wake you up, I would invite you to listen to a song by Charli XCX, the very nice and interesting UK pop star. It's called I Think About It All the Time. It takes a bit over 2 minutes. Towards the end, there are some strobing lights, not very big, but if you have any risk for seizure, epilepsy, or you just feel good, just please close your eyes. And I hope this is okay. We checked it. It shouldn't be too big, but beware of the strobing lights and look away if you feel in any way uneasy. Okay? Yes, and you can just enjoy the song. It's a nice song. But you can also kind of keep track of the cues for childbearing that she mentions. And now, yeah.
I think about it all the time, that I might run out of time, but I finally met my baby, and the baby might be mine, 'cause maybe one day I might, if I don't run out of time, would it give my life a new purpose? I was walking around in Stockholm, seriously thinking about my future for the first time. It was ice cold, playing demos on my iPhone. I went to my friend's place and I met their baby for the first time. How sublime, what a joy, oh my, standing there, same old clothes she wore before, holding a child. Yeah, she's a radiant mother and he's a beautiful father. And now they both know these things that I don't. I think about it all the time, that I might run out of time, but I finally met my baby, and the baby might be mine, 'cause maybe one day I might, if I don't run out of time, would it make me miss all my freedom? Think about it all the time, I think about it all the time, that I might run out of time, but I finally met my baby, and the baby might be mine, 'cause maybe one day I might, if I don't run out of time, would it give my life a new purpose? Think about it all the time. And they're exactly the same, but they're different now. And I'm so scared I'm missing out on something. So we had a conversation on the way home. Should I start my birth control? 'Cause my career feels so small in the existential scheme of it all. I think about it all the time.
Yes. Now we have a hard time with the mics, but would somebody like to say some childbearing cue that you picked up from these texts? Maybe you can just shout and I will repeat it. Sex, time, yeah. Social exposure, seeing her friend in Stockholm, yeah. Exactly. Those were the. We know demographers are not very great on theory, and I'm actually really pleased here to see the Miller proceptive cues to childbearing theory being used. because I was a bit uneasy earlier when I visited Vienna and everybody was talking about the theory of planned behavior. I mean, if there's anything the millennials and Generation Z are good at, it's planning behavior. And clearly that is not leading to people meeting even their reproductive goals, not to talk about socially sustainable fertility levels. So I myself have been using the life history theory framework developed in evolutionary biology. There are lots of research combining now evolutionary and demographical approaches. An excellent book edited by Rebecca Sear and Ron Lee and Oscar Berger, if you are interested in this. I will not go into the theoretical details, but kind of take the main, most important insights that I have learned myself from this vast literature. The key is that humans, as all other living organisms, during their lives have to solve different trade-offs related to what you spend your time and resources and kind of life for. You have to grow and mature and stay alive. You have to mate, and you have to reproduce from a species development. Not all people will do all these things, but in order to survive as a species, we have evolved to be good at solving this. And the key thing is that there are always trade-offs. And especially for a species which is long-lived, where we have very energetically and physiologically costly pregnancies, with actually, we know maternal mortality is always a risk. And also in a species where child rearing is cooperative. This is again a key concept from evolutionary theory, which just means that we have species with only maternal care of offspring, we have species with biparental care, but humans are species where the mother and both parents, but also typically many other kin, family, neighbors, societies participate in child rearing. It takes a village to raise a child. That's a cooperative breeding thing. This means that the timing of having a child is an essential movable thing, which we again have evolved to solve in very, very different climates, family structures, societies. We are highly flexible. How have humans decided to have a child? And especially then women. So I also put, we of course know that it is the number of reproducing females in a population that sets the limit to natural population growth and to fertility, and women are the ones who face the biggest trade-offs. I mean, starting with the expenses of pregnancy. How have women evolved to solve this dilemma? Well, by relying on different cues. And now, the cues for the good time to have a baby vary. These are not all. They range from the very physiological. If there's not enough food, your fat percentage will be so low that you don't have your menstruation and you can't reproduce, to much more social cues. Stress is a very typical lowering fertility cue. You need sexual partners, a committed partner. Actually, as I will show later, when we talk about baby fever, falling in love is actually one of the cues when people said they first had baby fever, is when they were really romantically in love. Then, of course, we have social status, wealth, the availability of social support, and seeing other people having babies. I mean, we are a very, very socially mimicking species. Seeing other people doing something is like the shortest cue. Oh, that must be a good thing, you know. And as in this, oh, she had a baby, she looks fine, she fits in her clothes. And actually, this woman she was talking about is also a famous pop singer and writer, so it's a peer. She sees a peer, Charli XCX, and have it. And then I would also add the benefits of parenthood status. We are certainly evolved to strive for social status and approval from our peers. And if you in a society as a mother or a father gain a certain kind of status or respect, or the opposite, that also is a cue for whether you should reproduce or not. Now, when I listed these cues, it's also interesting to see that they go from the very bodily and individual to wider things, to social, to the social level, right? And I'm wondering how to say this. When we last night in the taxi home discussed this day, I heard the comment that one thing we are not talking about is how individual fertility decisions affect others. Because of course they do. Actually, having a child is among probably the most kind of long-lasting, or having several children, things we as humans do which affect the lives of others, for better or for worse. Maybe they have to raise our children because we are incapable of doing it. You know, we often say when that baby is born, it's not just a baby is born, it's a mother is born. But at the same time, the father is born, or the other mother, if it's a same-sex couple, and the grandmother and grandfathers are born, and the maybe neighbors who are envious of the childbearing are born. So there are always social and demographic effects, of course, of childbearing, because we are cooperatively breeding species. I will briefly mention three studies we have done in the last years dealing with these trade-offs. The most substantial is we used register data to measure in contemporary Finland two different kinds of trade-offs and two different kinds of cues. One is the financial opportunity cost, which is for especially highly educated women in Finland very real. If a woman from a high socioeconomic status background has a child earlier compared to later, her income development will suffer. So there's an incentive to postpone, which we have been discussing much. On the other hand, if you postpone, you may have less available help from your kin. So we here assume that the mortality of kin, if you have people dying in your close family, siblings or parents, that will be a cue for earlier reproduction. So you see, this is, I think, very nice example of the trade-offs. And we found evidence for both of these acting in the contemporary Finnish population. Another recent study we did, we looked at, as I think many of you are also doing, using the latest GGS data. We looked at the social resources, what you receive from different kinds of people, emotional support, financial support, and how they are associated with fertility intentions and also with fertility ideals. We found, like the summary is, there is some, not very strong, but some support that especially for the idea that emotional support matters, and especially financial support from your parents. What I here think was really interesting was that loneliness, the perception that you don't have enough of social support, was very strong. It was as strong as religiosity or and like controlling for really, really many things. And this again goes back to the more, I would say, like primordial, if I have the feeling, even in wealthy Finland, if I have the feeling I don't have enough support, it seems to be affecting even my wishes to have a child. Lastly, the examples of social contagion, which was mentioned here, we heard in the song. This is a thing which has been really wonderfully studied by many of my colleagues present here and in this demographic European community. I just took two of my all-time favorite publications up there. But interestingly, there's also a recent, more psychological study applying my concept of baby fever to really psychological experimental studies exposing people to just pictures of parents with a child. And this is a 21 study, and I took the summary because I think it's very interesting. They are saying that we often of course, see wanting to have children as a very personal, high-stakes, high-involvement decision. I mean, we do know that the desires may change, but I have always tended to think of them as, somehow quite stable. But here they showed through 4 experiments that even the desire to have children can be influenced by basically showing pictures. They measured them immediately after the experiment and I think 3 days after. They are 4 studies, they are small scale, they should absolutely be replicated. But what their suggestion is that even just exposure to seeing a parent with a child will, through an increase in empathy, raise your fertility desires. And this is, I think, really interesting if we think about what's going on. I have also heard from 2 colleagues who talk about childbearing in a, what would I say, at least not anti-natalist mode, that they are basically saying, if you want to have children, we want to support you to have them. And they have also measured those ideals before and after the lectures, and they go up. So I mean, this is a bit surprising, and goes to the flexibility. Maybe our cues are much more flexible, and maybe we are much more socially attuned to cues than we have thought. Okay, now we will briefly talk about baby fever, because this is the second part. We have certainly evolved to use many cues around us to time reproduction, but we have not evolved to want to have children directly. So we have very strong evolved things for seeking social status, seeking peer approval, mimicking others. I mean, all these things are very strong. Seeking pleasure, sure, seeking sexual gratification. Also, we have very strong adaptations for taking care of a baby if it's there, mostly. There is also infanticide as a part, but mostly people become good parents if they have to. But since there was no contraception in the environment of evolutionary adaptedness, obviously we have not evolved to want to have children directly. And this was my study on baby fever really arose from this understanding or conundrum that on the one hand, all evolutionary psychologists were saying, oh, there's absolutely no such thing as wanting to have babies. How stupid can you be? We evolved to have sex and then to take care of the resulting babies. And the feminists were saying, oh, it's patriarchy indoctrinating women to want to have babies. And I had a really, really strong baby fever. And I was like, these both explanations don't sound true to me. So I started studying it, and now it has been validated psychologically that there is such a feeling. It can be quite intense, it can be quite painful. It does drive reproductive behavior, also in contemporary Finland. But it is not a kind of hardwired instinct, and not all people will have it. And now this is important when we live in a society where the decision-making for fertility is really, really small. It's basically the individual. If you think about the Charli song, it's her deciding. She even talks about my birth control, not our. It's not the couple, it's she is deciding. And we appear, I think, also to have a kind of emotional turn. Wolfgang Lutz very interestingly suggests that in the beginning of the demographic transition, many human populations had a cognitive turn, when from going to whatever number of children God or fate gives me, to the I can plan my numbers of children, I can stop. And now we seem to be going to this, I have to feel and want to have a child. And this is not something we can rely on. I will show you the baby fever. This is how baby fever looked in Finland back in the high days of relatively high fertility. You see variation among women. These are all women aged 20 to 59. Some had baby fever often, some had a few times, and some had not had it. And now these are the preliminary data from Finland now, and you basically see a huge increase in people who have never experienced baby fever, which again resonates with the fact that we may be in a low fertility trap, with the interesting sport hypothesis that was presented here yesterday. I can talk about these findings more. All the other things, when did you first have baby fever, what did it lead to, are very similar. But the big shift is that more people have not had the strong desire to have a child. And here I think it's really interesting that Charli also says this. I don't feel like I can make that decision. And like, I understand her fully. Okay, how many minutes do I have left? I have the last very short thing. I will just go through. Okay, final piece of this puzzle. We have evolved to be really flexible many cues. We have not evolved to really strive to have children directly. There are other distracting goals very easily. And then I would argue that our dominating social cues really mostly favor postponement. Here, fortunately, you saw this slide in the first presentation. This is just the biological fact. So when you should start to have a child, start pregnancy if you want to have a certain number of children with a certain average number of chances of success. And the problem here is that when you read The Economist, they will point out that, oh, a woman who has her first child when she's age 35 will earn twice the amount of a US woman who starts having a child in 22. Now, ignoring all the selection effects, I think it's very telling that The Economist 1 year ago was seeing this as an argument for later reproduction, and basically saying the woman who starts at 35 is doing the right thing from the, again, capitalist market view, but it's just not biologically feasible unless we then go for the extreme technological solutions we were discussing yesterday. And here, this is the final, again, I'm using Charli. She's giving these interviews where she's saying, on the one hand, oh, you know, should I become a mother just because there are these centuries of indoctrination? But then she's also saying, like the more feminist, traditional feminist interpretation of wanting to have a baby, then she also says, there's a lot of pressure on women to not talk about this stuff openly, like wanting to have a child, especially not in pop music or in music generally. We're supposed to be sexy and free and fun and wild. Which basically means, again, women should have a child when they are, you know, post-sexy, like 50, or what was it Thomas was, in our 50s and 60s. Then it's fine to be mothers, you know, because you are not going to be attractive as a pop star anymore. This is I think, profound social and cultural dilemma. I have what next slide? I think I will leave that for the discussion. I just want to thank my team. Venla Barry, the head of fertility studies especially, Aljona Artamonova, Katja Galvina, Anna Heglund, Tia Sorsa, and Nora Lehtonen, which have inspired everything I discussed with you today. Thank you.